Well, welcome everyone to Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross. I am your host and resource for self-care, connections, and collaborations. And our episode today, Shatter Mental Blocks with Rob Hanson, is well, welcome to our episode. Let's say that. Rob is a master in neuro-linguistic programming and hypnotherapy. And not only that, Rob has the unique ability to simplify complex ideas, and he specializes in removing those deep-rooted mental blocks. And I know that's a big issue of mental health, and that is also a hot topic nowadays. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my guest today, Rob Hanson. Rob, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here, Laura. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So can you tell us how you journeyed into this place in your life to
I can. So it's a long journey, right? I was just a free spirit as a kid, and that free spirit drug me into my early 20s, and I was just having a great time in life. My parents I was living at the beach at the time. My parents were on vacation. They came to stay with me for a couple of days, and we went to the beach, and we were having a great time. And I had like kind of my dad didn't approve of me not being like a super go-getter at the time, and so we had our struggles, right? And I think a lot of boys, when they turn into men, have struggles with their dad, and probably the same thing for women with their moms, right? And so on this particular day, we just started to talk, and it was great, and it was like, okay, we had overcome that. And about 5 minutes after that conversation, my dad had a massive heart attack and died right there on the beach. So, which so I like to say that my life is full of right angles, right? Like I'm going straight, and all of a sudden something happens, and I'm taking a huge right angle, and that right angle took me down not a great path. I was against the universe. I was against everything. I was like, how could this happen? How could, I was angry. I was whatever. On the other side of that, I was really just looking for clarity and trying to get answers. And I ended up at the Barnes and Noble or the Borders bookstore. I don't think we have them anymore, but I was in there, and I was in the self-help section. And this is like going back 30 years before your books were out. So I probably would have been drawn to one of those, Laura. But I found this book called You Can Heal Yourself, or You Can Heal Your Life, or something like that, from Louise Hay. And it just jumped out at me. And I was like, this isn't for me, but it just kept, I started to read it, and I was like, all right, I got to buy this book. So that was the beginning of my path, really. And I started down this road to figure myself out, and I would say, like, I had a lot of flaws at one point, bad programming, let's call it that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, first of all, I'm sorry for your loss. And I think a lot of us wind up with bad programming, whether you want to call it stereotyping or the surroundings, your environment, and stuff that you come up with. And just so you know, Barnes and Noble is still around. We have one in here. But yeah, everything's gone like to the internet. We're all so used to downloading and having copies and stuff in our hands.
Yeah.
So maybe you can explain to the audience a little bit more about what that neuro-linguistic programming means, and how that aids you in shattering those mental blocks.
Yeah. So it really started for me with, so I have 4 brothers. I have 2 older brothers and 2 younger brothers. And we are all over the map success-wise, right? Some of us are successful in business, and some of us are successful in personal, but it didn't seem like any of us were good at both, right? So we either struggled in business or struggled in personal. And it just baffled me that how we could be raised in the same environment by the same parents and come out totally different. And probably a lot of you listening probably have that same situation, right? And so I started down this path of like, all right, I have to figure this out. Like, and so I read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which was written in the 30s. And then I went down that rabbit hole, and I got a certification in positive mental attitude from the Napoleon Hill Foundation. And then from there, that worked for me for a little while, but it didn't fill up the glass the whole way, right? So it still was missing some things. So the next thing is I came onto repetition, right? Repetition is one of the ways we learn, right? And it's one of the way we install programs. Somebody tells you the same thing over and over, and you can probably repeat what your parents said. Like my mom always said to us, we would run out the door to go play sports or whatever, and she would say, "We're not heating the neighborhood, we're not air conditioning the neighborhood, whatever." Right? It sounds like you've heard that too. So,
oh yeah, and if you stand there with the refrigerator door open, penguins, or we don't live in a barn. Yeah, I think we've all had those.
yeah. So
Yeah.
those sayings that we hear over and over and over and over again can become our programs, right? And they can become how we react to things. So then I found this book called "What You Say When You Talk to Yourself" by Shad Helmstetter. It was written in the '80s, and the weird part is when I was on my kick of reading all these books so in Louise Hay's book, she listed a whole list of books, and that was one of them in there. So I had read that in the '80s, and I circled back maybe 10 or 15 years later to that book. And then I reached out to Shad and found him in Florida. He's probably in his 90s now, and he still works, and he's still passionate about this. He's been on Oprah, he's been on CNN, he's been, so anyway, he mentored me and he trained me in self-talk, is what he calls it, self-talk. So that filled up the glass, a little further. And then it was neuro-linguistic programming, right? The words we choose to say and how we phrase things. That's kind of a key to, your programs, right? And then it all filled up the glass, but I was still missing something, right? There was just something. So a few years ago, a friend sent me a hypnotherapy video that was on YouTube that had gone viral. It was like a wealth transformation. It was like 15 minutes long. So I listened to that, and like after 2 years, I was like, well, why don't I just reach out to this hypnotherapist guy? And so I did, and from there I became hypnotherapist. Right? He did, so it solved my problems, the problem that I was facing at that point. Right? It
Right.
corrected that. I was able to go back and sort of, when you're a kid and something happens, we may carry that around with us for our whole lives, and but we can let it go too, right? So and what you do is like, I think what you do is very similar to that. You try to let those past things go, right? And try to just be in the present, which is hard for a lot of us. So
It is difficult, and I've actually even had a friend that tried to do the hypnotherapy on me, and I was relaxed. I had an open mind. I don't know if it was just because I'm too much of an analytical person or whatever, but it didn't work for me. And that's to say it won't work in the future. Does it work for you? For most people? I mean, I think for most people it works. Or how does hypnotherapy really work? 'Cause I think we all have some strange ideas or stereotypes around it. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit how that works.
yeah. So hypnotherapy is different than stage hypnosis, right? Like you see these guys that are like almost doing an act, right? They're up on the stage, Um, and to me, I'm not quite sure that those people aren't plants, some of them, but so really, so Laura, you would be the perfect person to really benefit from hypnosis because you resist it so hard. That's one of your programs. One of your programs in your head is saying there's something that is not right with this, and I'm going to resist it all the way to the end, right? But and this is why hypnotherapy would work for you, or for really anyone that's facing a challenge. So what happens is that these programs, your mind has all these programs stored in there that you've gotten from your life and from your environment, and some in your DNA, right? Nobody's really sure 100%. But your mind is only there to do one thing, and that's keep you alive and protect you, right? Keep you alive and protect you. So when you get these new messages, right, like you challenge it so hard because you've told it through repetition, like this is, this is a problem. Do not do this, so, and that's maybe kind of what people face and you face. So, but what happens in hypnosis, some people fall asleep because they get so relaxed, but basically it's a way to relax someone. It's not really like, when I got into it, I was like, that's all there is to hypnotize someone. And really all it is to put them in a deep state of relaxation, right? And once they're in that deep state of relaxation, you become much more susceptible to new thoughts and new phrases and new things. But it's not just one time. So you have to really, like, when somebody works with me, we do what we call rapid transformational therapy, right? And we go back to see if we can uncover in their childhood or sometime in the past of where this incident came in. And then we use some techniques to say, okay, well, what do you want to say to your old self, kind of, right? And sometimes with people who binge eat and things like that, it's like, and I had that problem for a little while myself. Was, my dad got paid every other week with 4 brothers. Like, we were fighting for food by the end of the second week, right? So, so sometimes you get that thing going on and you can't control it, but it fights it so hard. So when you're totally relaxed, like, so there's different levels. And I'm not going to give you the technical terms, but you can be wide awake, which, is about, I want to say, probably, if you're wide awake and you're engaged in the now, it's probably only about, like, maybe 30% of the whole day. So 30% of 8 to 10 hours. The rest of the time you're like, you're daydreaming or whatever, right? So you're really only there. It's a small percentage. The rest of the time, though, your programs in your mind are always going. Your mind never shuts off. Okay, so when you're learning something new, if it's something you say, oh, well, I heard that, and usually you hear it over and over and over again, right? This is why ads constantly are on TV, right? Over and over and over again. Eventually you're like, okay, yeah, I'm going to buy one of those, right? And then you get it and you're like, oh, what did I do?
And you might not have seen them for years, but the tune will come right back.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So what happens is you just get so relaxed that then during hypnosis, we make suggestions like, really, whatever it might be, if it's like you're trying to stop smoking. So people who struggle with smoking, basically, what happens is they get so relaxed from the smoking that it calms them down. So their mind is like, okay, I have to smoke, and this just works, and so then you have to tell them, like, oh, it doesn't, under hypnosis, oh, it really doesn't taste that good. And then over time you're like, well, when you hear it enough, then you start to believe it, and then you change your programs that way. So
yeah, it's amazing how we can tell ourselves stuff and it affects the taste, or maybe you were forced to eat something when you were a kid and you swear up and down you can't stand it, or, and then later on it's like, oh, this is actually good. And they're like, yeah, well, you always hated that. It's like, it was just, I don't know whether it's the environment, or I like to call it head trash. We get a lot of head trash in there.
Yes. Yeah. Well, one of the things for me is like, when I first started dating years ago, we would go out to eat, and everyone would get, we'd be out as a group or whatever, everyone would get steak, and I'd be like, I don't like steak. I realized I didn't like steak because my parents couldn't afford it, so they told me I didn't like it, so so that was one of the programs that I got. Now I love steak, but I don't eat it a whole lot, but I do love it. So
yeah, I've learned to dump some of them, because I've learned, and I've done a lot of stuff too since that time that someone tried to put me under the hypnotic thing. And maybe it was just, because I lost my husband 18 years ago. So maybe I was just kind of afraid of revisiting that for whatever reason. I had some kind of, block up. But, often we get told that our health and our mental state or all this stuff, a lot of times people like to say it's genetics. And I'm like, okay, there's a small percentage of it that's genetics, but we actually have the ability to choose and do different things and change it so that we're not susceptible to that. And so I've learned that, and there's different practices, Qigong stuff and that helps you kind of get more in touch with your body and relax. So yeah, I'd be curious one of these days to see, where that goes, because it's different states. But it's like you said, you read a book like 30 something years ago and then circled back around. I think when your environment changes, or maybe when you're older, you just happen to have like a different, maybe you got a different meaning out of it or a different perception from it than when you read it a long time ago.
Yeah, and there's that old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? So I have these books that are in my bookshelf that that I love, and that I'll be just standing there looking, and I'll say, oh, like, pull this book out, and then something different comes out of that book. So I think part of it is you have the reticular activator in your brain, right? Which
Mhm.
is, so for those of you that don't really know the term, it's like, okay, so if you were going to go out and buy a car, and let's just say you have a Toyota, but you're going to buy an Acura now, all of a sudden you start seeing Acuras everywhere before you buy it, right? That's your reticular activator in your brain. So that can happen, and so when you're in a certain place, you're really looking for something, and then when you're in another place, you're looking for something else. So that could be the answer to that.
Yeah. So why do you think sometimes people often fail when they consciously desire to make that change, but they still fail?
That is the greatest question you could have asked me, Laura. I really appreciate that, because so part of it, it goes back to your programming, right? Like, your programming is so strong that your brain just takes over. And it's just like, if we were to go to a gym on January 2nd, right? We wouldn't even be able to get a parking spot in there. 3 weeks later, we could get a parking spot, right? Because your if in most cases your willpower is only conscious, right? It's only when you're consciously awake is your willpower actually working. So in that very short 30% of 10 hours, right, you have willpower. But when you go to sleep, your subconscious is like, you got to get up and eat. Like, some people get up in the middle of the night and eat. You have to, when you get up. So your willpower, doing it by willpower, can work, but it's very hard. So that's probably the simple answer to that question.
So more like reprogramming, creating new habits kind of
Yeah,
thing. And the
and
willpower, obviously, you have to be willing to stick with it and do it and not give up.
yeah, and sometimes it can be an instant change, like, for the good or the bad, right? So recently, like, I normally don't work with children, right? I normally, but there was a girl who was in church with her school, and right, she was like in fourth grade, and a third grader who was sitting in front of her passed out for whatever reason. And now this girl was so afraid that she was going to pass out, she couldn't go to school. She couldn't go. She kept saying, "Am I going to pass out? Am I going to pass out?" So traumatic events, like sudden traumatic events, can have the same effect as long-term programming can too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's all different, realms of trauma. It's not always, extreme. It's different for everyone too. So yeah, maybe can you share one thing with our audience today that can help facilitate an easier change?
I think not putting pressure on yourself, because when you put that pressure on yourself to say, I have to change, I have to change, I have to change, you're just putting too much pressure on. You just have to relax and just let it happen naturally, right? You need to take action, but and you can, you don't have to have a custom hypnotherapy tape made for you, or recording made for you. There's plenty of them on YouTube you can find in any realm, and just find somebody whose voice is, calming and relaxing, and just listen to it. You're always in control when you're in hypnosis. So you're not, when you see these people up on the stage, so stage hypnotists, they look for very specific things in people, like the fluttering of their eyes, like when they start to put them under. So some of the people on that stage, that's why they bring up 20 people, because they're looking for that one who's very susceptible to, they want to be hypnotized, they would enjoy it, and then once they're under, they sort of want to be the character on stage, and they sort of are in hypnosis. So so
Yeah, it's kind of tough to explain, I'm sure. There's a lot of gray areas. I think, in a lot of this stuff, not everything's black and white because we're such different individuals and everything.
Yeah, and it doesn't work for everyone. I've just found for me and for a lot of people that I work with, it's usually the last resort of of the of the st- of the of their process. In fact, like I can't remember who it was, but I think it was one of the Los Angeles Dodgers baseball players was having a struggle, and they hired a hypnotist to help them through their struggles, and it helped them. So it can help in many things, and some things it doesn't really work too. So
Well, I know we have a lot more to uncover, and we're going to talk more about shattering those mental blocks. But right now, we do need to take a break from our sponsors, and we will be right back.
Hello, my name is Peter. I'm a Dharma Master. I teach Qigong at the Bright Beings Academy. What kind of Qigong do we teach? Well, it helps you to get your mind into your body and your breath very quickly. We really start off with quite quick movements to help cater for the busy Western mind, coming into stretching out the meridians, waking up the chakra system and the danjons, coming into Jigan meditation, which helps you to really focus on the energy in and around your body, bringing you into that beautiful calm state where you can sit and meditate really easily, whereas maybe before you found it really difficult. So Qigong at the Bright Beings Academy will help you get more in touch with yourself.
Relief for PTSD, anxiety, pain, insomnia, and many other ailments. Introducing Vibe, the world's only pocket PEMF device. You place in your pocket while cooking, cleaning, relaxing, watching TV, sitting at your computer, reading, or walking. Self-contained standalone device. No drugs. No other phone or Bluetooth connections required. No monthly subscription fees. No apps to download. No bozone. The future of medicine is in the frequencies. Come join the revolution.
Hi, I'm Bobby Aldridge with BAM Metrics. There are so many programs out there that measure your swing speed, sets, reps, your BMI, your body fat, but the one thing they're not measuring that's so essential is mobility. Mobility is the key. If you're measuring your mobility, your performance will get better and you will reduce your pain. I created BAM Metrics to make it easy for people to repeat the exercises so they could do it properly at home on their own. It's simple, it's easy to do, and from a senior to a pro athlete.
Hi, I'm Kelly Melissa Reinhart, host of Make Mental Health Matter. Join me on Mondays at 11 a.m. and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on the Achieve TV network right here on E360 TV.
And we are back. So we were talking a little bit about, the hypnotherapy and on stage and, stage hypnosis, but how does hypnotherapy aid people in that personal transformation and growth?
So it's different for everyone, right? It really depends on what they want to accomplish. So if you think about it, like I started out working. My background is basically real estate, right? And I started working. I've been in real estate for 45 years, and it was kind of the same thing with my brothers. It was like, okay, so I'd see these very smart people who were very hardworking, who were just spinning their wheels. And then I'd see these other people who weren't as bright as those people, and they were like having wild success. So I started to, people started to ask me, well, like, how do I do this? What do I do? And then I realized that they were having these mental blocks, right? So then I started helping people, with hypnosis. And, I first I would say, all right, well, maybe you need a mentor, right? There's usually steps before hypnosis. It's like, maybe you need a mentor, or maybe you need a coach. And then if none of that works, if you have a coach, you could have the best coach in the whole world, but if you don't take action, right, you're going to fail. So so a lot of times in the sales environment, it's people don't want to take the actions because they're afraid of either success or failure. It's kind of crazy that people are afraid of success, but some people are. And some people are just afraid of rejection, and some people are, some people some people have super thick skin and they don't care if somebody says no and hangs up on them, right? They just call the next person. But other people take it personally, and then so a lot of times when you're getting no and rejection all the time, you just get more and more down on yourself, right? And so a lot of times this helps with that. This relaxes you. I always say, listen, after a call like that, if you're thrown off, take 3 or 4 really deep breaths, and that usually centers you, brings you back to a happy spot.
Yeah. Can you maybe share even with us an instance where you helped someone shatter those mental blocks?
Yeah. So there was he wasn't a real estate agent. He was a salesperson, and his job was to call on existing clients and offer them something. And he would get on the call, and he would have great conversations with them, but he would never ask for the sale. He felt like he was being too intrusive, right? So under hypnosis, it came out that he didn't like to be sold because he couldn't say no, right? So we had a few things we had to work on. We had to work on how he's able to say no and why he's able to say no. And so that came out. So once we uncovered that he could say no, then he was able to ask for the sale on the other end because he wasn't really afraid of someone saying no to him. So it changed his business. And our shift is like, you're not trying to sell them something. You're really trying to help them. Your product is really good for them and it will really help them. Once he understood that, and he had to overcome the no part, but at the same time, in the recording, we put in certain language around, that your product is really great and you are doing a service and a big benefit. And the guy became the top salesperson in his company, and he got the gold jacket, so his next year, and they all wanted to know what he had done, and he wouldn't tell any of them because he was a little embarrassed by it, but he just wouldn't tell them. So that was one of my best successes.
And I think that's probably very common, I would think, even with business owners or when you work a job. I used to always say that, I don't like the used car salesman approach, the whole pushy shove down your throat and, oh, why do you need this? Never could stand that. And I worked years ago, I had worked in Sears, a hometown store, and you used to have people that would do that. I'm like, I just tell you, they tell me what they want, like whether it's a refrigerator, we'll show them the different options. I just tell them what warranties are available. It's up to them. I don't care. Yes, it pays me more if they got a warranty, but it's their choice. And I never, crammed it down their throat. And I actually wound up being one of their highest salespersons, but I always told people I hate sales, don't like that. But it, like you said, it's a process, and it's, the fact that you're not trying to sell someone something, you have something that can help someone, and it's either for them or not. So.
And, interestingly, today is much different than sales was 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, because most people, even in real estate, do their research and they know what they want to buy before they ever go to a store, or before they ever go to see a house, or before they ever go to buy a product. They already know what they want. And if it's a high ticket item, now they're just looking for the right fit of that person. So it's shifted from I have what you want, although the car industry doesn't seem to have come around on that. But it's I have what you want, and you're going to have to grovel to get it in the car industry. But everywhere else, like, it's I have what you want, and let's see if we're the right fit and build that relationship and trust, right? So I don't trust any of the car people, and I just bought a car. I don't even trust those people, but I knew that I had looked for a long time. I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew around what price I wanted to get, and I ended up right in that ballpark, and it didn't really matter about the salesperson. And here's really the difference. I probably wouldn't recommend them again, right? But if you do a good job in sales, you can actually get referrals and recommendations. So
Yeah, I always have more respect for people that, kind of respect you and your wishes and don't keep trying to cram things down your throat. But I think a
Yeah.
lot of us do that trick where, okay, you go to the car dealer on Sunday because they're not open and you can look without being hounded, or, now everything's on the internet and you can research. But like you said, if you research, you get prepared and you get armed, because when you go in there unprepared is probably one of the worst mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So one of the things you do is simplifying complex ideas into relatable narratives. Can you explain a little bit more kind of what that process looks like?
Yes, I'm going to really try to simplify it, because there's like a compound effect, right? Like in a lot of in our thinking, right? We start to build your mind starts to build walls around walls, right? So you'll have an idea that you all of a sudden you accept, right? Once you accept an idea, now you start to add on to that, right? You start to, in the sales process, like if you remember, since we're talking about cars, right? You used to get the brochure when you went to the car dealership if you didn't buy the brochure, right? And you would take that brochure home, and it was only like maybe a 10-page thing, and you would look at it like 4 times that night before you went to bed. You'd look at it the next day. You'd look at it when you came home. Your mind starts to make these decisions and determinations about things, right? So if you're trying to protect yourself, what happens is your mind says, okay, well, I let's just say, I got hurt exercising. I was running, I got hurt. Well, now I'm not going to hurt. I'm going to walk. Well, now the mind says, oh, well, if you walk, you could get shin splints, and then you start down these rabbit holes, and then the whole thing is now you have a lot of different layers to uncover before you can actually get to the result that you want. So in hypnotherapy, sometimes the problem that somebody came to me with isn't really the issue that they really need to work on. It's something else, right? So but it's just a process. And so I would say usually people, step one, it's just like anything. If you were starting a business or you're doing anything, there's always steps to do things. And in this, it's kind of reverse, because you have to peel the layers back to get down to the core issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody is different. And when you mention the spiraling, to me, I think I guess I have a different ways of looking at it now, because sometimes when we spiral, it's like you're stuck in all these negative what ifs, and you don't look at it from a different perspective about what possibly good could come of it, rather than the negative.
Right. Exactly. Yes, exactly. So, and that's what happens, that's why like runners get in the runner's high, because they're so relaxed. And when I used to run, and then I got a back injury, but I used to run, and I would, and so like I would run about 9 miles a day. Some days I would walk, some days I wouldn't go at all, but most of the times I would run 9 miles a day. And at the end of the run, I didn't really ever remember the run, right? Because I was in self-hypnosis, and that sort of runner's high. Like, and you might do this driving home today. You may just be on autopilot. Autopilot is when your subconscious mind is taken over, right? So there's this thing called subconscious behavior, right? Which is breathing. Okay. So breathing happens without you doing anything. It's on, it goes, right? But the really interesting thing is that you can change your breath, right? Like as soon as you become aware of it, you can take deep breaths, you can relax yourself, right? So once you're aware of your programs, now you can start to take action against them. Like what? So the one thing I would say is like when you have an immediate reaction. Sometimes if you have kids, it's like a kid does this, and you have an immediate reaction, and it's a little bit maybe over the top, and you're like, okay, well, why am I start to think, well, take a break. Well, why am I acting like that? It's probably something that your parents did, or somebody you knew did, like an older brother or sister, right? So just start to become aware, and that can really help you uncover some of the layers without hypnosis,
Right. Yeah. Because I was going to say, because that's a big thing. And how do our listeners recognize that? Because subconscious, like you said, it's autopilot. So a lot of times we don't, recognize it. Do you have like tips or techniques of how they can maybe recognize those subconscious, the constraints that are holding them back?
Yeah, so neuro-linguistic programming is pretty interesting, right? Like years ago, we all know who Tony Robbins is, right? And I remember I went and saw Tony Robbins in New York City maybe 30 years ago, and he said something that stuck with me for till this day. He said, and there were vinyl records, right? He said, imagine if you took a vinyl record and you scratched it all up, it would never sound the same playing it, right? So that's kind of, from a neuro-linguistic program perspective, like that's what you want to do with your old programs. You want to get in there and interrupt them, right? You want to get in there and stop them. So how you would do that is like, all right, well, even if it's after the fact, like the cooling down period, like some people, like my one brother, he goes from 0 to 100 in 2 or 3 seconds, and then he comes right back down in 4 or 5 seconds. If you're that kind of person, right, then just later think about, well, what was the event that kicked it, and why did I go that? Like that's an unrealistic response, right? So if you find like anything's unrealistic, then or unjustified, right? Like then you need to start thinking about why that is and where did that come from, and you'd be amazed at what comes up, right? So.
Oh, I've done it a lot. I always call it chaotic and crazy that I left back in Colorado, especially since I just came back from Denver. Because you just, you feel that tension. I mean, they almost tried to make me a compact car as soon as I came in because they're not paying attention. And I'm like, okay, just get me through. I'm like, okay. Yeah. I was like, all right, I didn't give them the horn, didn't blow, I'm just thinking, okay, thank you for not hitting me and turning me into a compact. Just get me to the hotel so I can get this done and go home. But yeah, I mean, but back in the day, it's just like, it used to be just almost like instant what they called road rage nowadays, because you'd be, pissed off if somebody almost, hit you or cut you off or did this, and but I just learned, to me, life was just too short to get that upset. It's like, just be thankful that I didn't get compacted. I'm good. They're gone. We move on.
Yeah. So I have a brother who has road rage, and the way I interrupt them, and you can do this with somebody anyway. Like I'll say to my brother, and this is a good one for siblings. I'll say, "What'd you say, Granddad?" When he, because my grandfather would do that, right? I say, "Granddad, what'd you say?" And then he'll be like, and then it's an awareness of like, okay, you're acting just like he acted, So you learn that from him 50 years ago, right? So you're sitting in the back as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, and he's having road rage with somebody, and now all of a sudden you have it because you rode around with him enough, and it's like, so.
Yeah, or sometimes I have a passenger with me that'll like be spout off and getting all upset. I'm like, oh, and yelling. I'm like, okay, you realize they can't hear you, right? I'm the only one that can hear you. Do you feel better now? I'm just like, too short for that. Maybe you could share with us, what is one of the most challenging mental blocks that you've had to help somebody get through?
Oh, great question. It's different for everyone, but I would say one of the most is that they deserve, right? That they deserve things. They deserve love. They deserve wealth. They deserve a nice vacation. They deserve a nice car. So the deservability factor can really be one of these deep rooted issues. So that would be the number one, I would say.
Why do you think that is? I mean, I know it's different for everyone, but maybe some general ideas, just upbringing, environment, combination.
Yeah, it really goes down to the individual. That's why, like, we usually uncover that, or I usually uncover that during the rapid transformational therapy session, which the way it sort of works is like we do a pre-session call. So I find out what it's like a half an hour, 15 minutes to half an hour. I find out what that person wants to work on. And then, they start to tell me a little bit about their past. And then once I have enough information, I know, all right, well, where we're going to go. And the deservability thing, usually, it's something that we all struggle with, right? Everybody, there's only one Michael Jordan, right? Mike, the greatest basketball player of all time. He's a billionaire. He's a good looking guy. There's only one of them in each thing. So if that's, like I had a friend who said they wanted to be like somebody super famous and like Henry Ford. They wanted to be just like Henry Ford, a great business leader, an innovator, whatever. And that person didn't live up to it. And in the end, he felt as though he didn't deserve to be Henry Ford because he had put Henry Ford on such a pedestal, right? That if he got to that same pedestal with Henry Ford, his whole thing would be shattered about Henry Ford. So he didn't want to go there, right? So it could be anything, it really could be anything. So, but that is the biggest one.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I've worked with some mentors too, and I did the same thing. I stuck them on this pedestal, and it's like, okay, who am I? But they're down to earth. They're willing to mentor you and train you, and they're like, don't put me on that pedestal. It hurts when I fall,
Yeah.
But it's us that's putting them up there. It's not that,
Right. We look up to them, and it's like just when you're a kid, right? When you're a kid, the kid who's 2 or 3 years older than you playing the sport or the instrument that you want to play, they've just had 3 more years practice, and when you get there, you're going to be as good or better than them. So, but we can't, it's not easy to translate that in real time. It's like, that person's great, I'll never be that great, but then, some people just, with the mentor thing, right? Like when I mentor people, I try to tell them, listen, my whole job here is for you to get better than me and move on from me, right? You will eclipse me at some point, and then I've done my job, right? So it's just an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that a lot. I've seen it in myself, as far as kind of, why don't we look up to ourselves and what we've accomplished and done, rather than, keep looking up at everybody else. I mean, yes, you want to have someone maybe to learn from and have some of those characteristics, but if you're not being you, then
yeah. One time, that's a great point. One time when I was speaking with Shad Helmstetter, who was mentoring me at the time, I can't remember what we were talking about, but he said he must have seen the look in my face, and he said, what thoughts are going through your head right now? And I said, I can't share them with you. I would never say that to anyone else, but I'm saying it to myself, right? Like we are our own worst critics. We will say things that you could never repeat, that you would, you would be embarrassed to say out loud, right? If anyone ever heard you. So we need to let ourselves off the hook a bit, and say, hey, like I'm doing the best that I can right now, and as long as I'm moving forward in life, and not let that slow you down. Because I tell people all the time, if you can improve by 1% a week, right, you'll be 50% better in at the end of the year, and 1% is not a big leap to make, So
no, but 1% can sound small, but it can make a huge difference. So
yes.
What do you do personally when you have like those thoughts that you'd be embarrassed? I mean, is there something you tell yourself or you do? I've heard some people that just kind of say, thanks for showing up, but I got this, or how do you change?
You know what? So this is the technique that I use, Laura. As soon as I start to do that, I go into the bathroom or into a mirror where no one's around, usually the bathroom, because you can close the door and be in private. And I start saying those things out loud, right? Looking at myself. And then I start to laugh, because it's so, if I can make it the fool, then I can make it to be like, oh yeah, that's like, that's like, go away. It's like, your programs are that little evil guy on your shoulder, right? And as soon as you shed light on him, he goes away. So I just look in the mirror and I say it, and then I start to laugh. I'm like, ha ha ha, that's, and sometimes I laugh hysterical, because it's like, really? So.
Yeah, that's one thing I used to always struggle with, which is why sometimes I even struggle with doing the shorts, because if I'm just standing there looking at myself talking, I feel like someone's going to come after me with a straight jacket because I'm just I'm talking to myself, or the dog will look at me like, who are you talking to, and what's your issue?
Yeah. Like I look at pictures of myself, and that's one of the things, like I look at pictures of myself and I start to become very critical of myself. Like, and like for me, I'm 6'4" and I'm like 230 pounds. So like I'm a giant, and usually I'm around someone else who's not, and I'm like, oh, geez, why can't I look like that person? And then I'm like, okay, well, everybody gets what they get, So
Oh, yes. I can relate. I'm 5'11", and I used to do the cooperative office education. So I used to always wear 3-inch heels, which put me at 6'1", but my friends were shorter. So I used to wind up, I wound up with worse posture because I was slouching down. And then I realized, I don't care. You go to places, and some of the, littler women will come up, and they're like looking up at you. Like, I just decided I'm good with who I am. It's okay.
Yeah.
So.
I think one of the goals for me is to have everyone that I work with be okay with who they are, be happy with who they are. And when you can get to that place, then, nothing can throw you off, right? You are comfortable. And we all know people like that. And so my suggestion would be is have that person mentor you, right? If you find someone who's got a trait that you want to learn, be around them, because the repetition of what they say and do will reprogram you, right? It doesn't have to be under hypnosis. The difference with hypnosis is it can happen very quickly, because when you are in that relaxed state, they call it the theta state, right, of your brain waves, you can, it's almost like your enemy is kind of asleep, and you can, it's like you can sort of, you can have bigger strides quickly in that state. So even right before you fall asleep, that's like right before you fall asleep or right before you wake up, that is when you're most suggestible. So some people wake up, and if you say the same thing over and over to you right as you're falling asleep, like today was a great day, tomorrow's going to be a great day, whatever, you wake up with a different perspective. Hypnosis is just one way to get you there.
Right. It's amazing how that works. So, Rob, when you work with your clients, do you work with them in person, over Zoom? You can work with them anywhere. How do you normally work with your clients?
So lately, since COVID, it's been over Zoom usually. I do like working in person, but I'm in New Jersey, so I'm near Philadelphia in New Jersey, but most people are too far away, and it's not cost effective to do it in person. So there are a lot of people locally that I do work with, but most of the people find me through someone else who's in some other location, and so. They reach out to me. You can see my website there. Even though this is, like, I started out, like I said, working with real estate agents, but I work with anyone who has a block. But I will say that we need to have a call first to see if it's the right fit for you, and to see if I can help you, because sometimes sometimes I just can't, for whatever the reason. Sometimes you need maybe professional help of like a doctor or something like that. And I'm just a hypnotherapist.
But that can be huge. That can be huge too. So the best way.
And
go ahead. Sorry.
Hypnotherapy. Sorry to cut you off. Hypnotherapy will be like now acupuncture. Like if you go to your doctor and your doctor prescribes acupuncture, your insurance will cover it. I feel like hypnotherapy is, since mental health, since COVID has become a big issue, as hypnotherapists, we're starting to gain some respect, right, from the medical community. It's just one more tool. So it may at some point become covered under your insurance too.
Yeah. And there's a lot of holistic things out there that just, haven't been necessarily approved, but depending on if you have, doctors and stuff that are, open to it, or say, hey, I'm going to, try this. And there's different things out there and stuff that we can try. So, so would they go to your website then to book that discovery call?
Yes, you can book a discovery call right on my website.
Which is the hypnoticagent.com.
Hypnoticagent.com. Yep. You can go right on there, book a call, and I will, we'll have a session, and if it works, it works for you. And if it doesn't work, it's, I always love to connect with people. So I like to find out how people got to where they got, and, how they arrived at where they are. It doesn't mean you're stuck where you are, though. That means, like, especially the people who are watching your show are the people who are trying to better themselves. And I love what you do, and I appreciate what you do, and I'm grateful for it, because we need more of you. We do.
Thank you. I believe we can do more together than by ourselves, but we're all on a different journey. So it's one or another, and they're never going to be the same, because that's why we're individuals. But
Yeah.
yeah, I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing everything with us. What is on the horizon for you? Where do you see it going?
So I have started to do some speaking engagements. So I like talking to people face to face more than, this is great because we get a great conversation, and we connect with more people. But when you can connect with someone and someone says, men or women, give you a hug, like, thanks so much for helping me. Like, that's really when I feel like I've done my job, when I've helped someone. So it's the fulfillment that I get.
Yeah, I think that's what one thing COVID did to a lot of us. For those of us that are, well, I'm an ambivert, I'm in the middle, but for those of us that are used to more little, human interaction or getting those hugs or, whatever. And it's like all of a sudden we wound up, being quarantined, doing things through computer all the time. So you just kind of have to learn to read the body language, smiles or whatever, and just, feel good or know that you made their day, and kind of have to pick up on different signals. But
yeah, well, so during COVID, I want to say it was late 2020. I had enough, right? I had not seen any people, and somebody was having a party because they were like this isn't a real thing, So they had this party. So I was against my better judgment. I went to the party and I got COVID. But I saw people, and it was good, and I'm glad we're back to a more normal life now, so it suits me better, and if you're struggling with it, phobias and things like that, a lot of phobias have come up during COVID because it's something we all focused on. I have one of my brothers is like, he's become a recluse because he's afraid of everything now, because he's, he feels like don't watch the news. Whatever you do not watch the mainstream news, any news, because it's all negative, right? So he loves the news. He's a news junkie, and he's getting worse and worse and worse. I tell him, you just got to get rid of your cable TV, just stop, so
it's not that you don't need to know what's going on, but you don't need the constant negative. I wish they would have more, positive and good things going on instead of, but it's, for whatever reason, our society does not deem it newsworthy. So it's like, I have enough through electronics that will update me on something going on. I don't record or watch it either, but I do know what's going on.
Yeah, because most news today is opinion. So it's, it's not, I'm just a facts guy. Give me the facts. Okay, that's good, so.
Yeah, you and me both. But we are out of time, and that's a rabbit hole we're not going to have time to go down. But Rob, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your knowledge and everything with everyone. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And again, I'm grateful for what you do for helping as many people as you can. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So everyone, I want to thank you for watching us. Keep in mind, we have not only Rob, but a lot of other amazing guests that are coming up. You might have either missed an episode or more coming up. So you can either go to the Facebook or YouTube channel. That's at Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross. If you're doing the Facebook page, just add TV show at the end. But if you go to the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and then you won't have to miss another guest. And we'll keep you in the know. And if there's a topic that you ever would like to have discussed, by all means, message me, and we'll see what we can do about getting a guest on, because our whole purpose is for helping you, giving you resources for your self-care and creating those connections and collaborations. So thanks again, Rob, for joining me, and we will see everybody next week.
Thank you.